The neon sign flickered above the dusty pumps of the roadside station, casting erratic shadows across the cracked asphalt. It was just past midnight, the kind of hour when the desert wind whispered secrets through the mesquite bushes, carrying the faint scent of sage and exhaust. Hank, Viper. Doran leaned against his weathered Harley, the chrome glinting under the harsh lights like a predator's eyes. His leather vest, patched with the Iron Promise emblem, a coiled serpent around a broken chain, hung heavy on his broad shoulders, scarred from years of roads less traveled. He was wiping grease from his hands with a rag, the engine of his bike still ticking cool when she appeared. A girl no older than 16 stumbled out of the shadows near the highway entrance. Her dark hair was tangled, eyes wide with a terror that cut through the night like a siren's wail. She clutched a faded denim jacket around her thin frame, sneakers scuffing the gravel as she scanned the empty lot. The station attendant, a grizzled man nursing coffee inside, barely glanced up from his crossword. But Hank saw her, the way her breath hitched, the tremble in her step. She was running from something invisible, something that had already stolen her sleep. "Sir," she gasped, stopping a few feet from him, her voice cracking like dry earth under boot. "Please, my mother, she disappeared after the date." The words hung in the air, raw and desperate, pulling at the quiet. Nina Calderon, that was her name, she blurted out next, had waited at home for her mom to return from a rare night out, a dinner at some roadside diner called the Blue Coyote, just off Route 17. It was supposed to be simple, a blind date arranged through an old friend, a chance for Elena Calderon to step out of the shadows of single motherhood and factory shifts. But the clock had ticked past 10, then 11 and nothing. No call, no text, just an empty driveway and the girl's growing dread. Hank straightened, his calloused hand pausing on the rag. He'd seen plenty in his 47 years, wars that left ghosts in his eyes, brothers lost to the bottle or the badge, but this hit different. Elena was a name he didn't know, but the story clawed at him. Nina described the last moments. Her mom waving goodbye in a simple sundress, the old Chevy rumbling away under streetlights that buzzed like angry hornets. And then, the detail that sent ice through his veins. A car, dark and unfamiliar, circling the block twice before Eleanor turned the corner. Nina had peeked from the window, heart pounding, but dismissed it as paranoia. Until now. He nodded slowly, his voice a low rumble, steady as the engine he'd just silenced. "Tell me everything, kid, from the start." She did, words tumbling out like spilled gasoline. The restaurant's address, the time, around 8:30, the way her mum had seemed hopeful, almost light, for the first time in months. Elena worked doubles at the textile mill, raised Nina alone after a deadbeat dad vanished like smoke. No family nearby, no connections that mattered in a town where the powerful overlooked the forgotten. Disappearances like this, they turned into cold files, statistics etched in indifference. But Hank knew the undercurrents, the corrupt threads weaving through small-town justice, where badges protected their own and the vulnerable faded away. As Nina spoke, the wind picked up, rattling the station's wind chimes like distant warnings. Hank's mind raced back to his own ghosts, a promise made under fire in a forgotten desert war, to a brother in arms who'd saved his life. "Watch out for the ones who can't fight back," the man had said, blood staining his fatigues. Hank had carried that oath like a tattoo on his soul through the club's founding, through nights when the Iron Promise rode for the lost. Now here was this girl, eyes pleading, and the weight of it settled on him. He couldn't walk away, not from her, not from Elena. "Stay here," he said, pulling out his phone, the screen glowing against the night's ink. His thumb hovered over the group chat, 50 strong, scattered across the state, but always a call away. The club wasn't about chaos, it was about the code, the silent pact that bound them tighter than blood, riders who traded uniforms for vests, mechanics and welders by day, guardians by necessity. Hank typed quick, "Need all hands. Woman missing, details incoming, ride at dawn." Messages lit up instantly. Affirmatives from Jax in the north, Rico down south, the whole network humming to life. Nina watched, hope flickering in her tear-streaked face. "You'll find her? Really?" Hank met her gaze, the desert stars sharp overhead. "We don't stop till we do. That's the promise." In that moment, as the first replies poured in, he felt the old fire stir, the one that had pulled him from his own darkness years ago. This wasn't just a search. It was a stand against the void that swallowed the quiet ones. By sunrise, engines would roar, headlights cutting the dark like blades of light. And whatever shadows had taken Elena Calderon, they'd meet the unyielding wall of men who honored their word. The station clock ticked toward 1 a.m., but the night felt alive now, charged with purpose. Hank handed Nina a bottle of water from the cooler, his rough hand gentle. "What's she like, your mom?" Nina's voice softened, painting Elena in strokes of warmth. The way she'd hum old ballads while cooking, the laugh lines around her eyes from better days. It was a portrait of resilience, cracked but unbroken, and it fueled Hank's resolve. He pictured the routes they'd map, back roads to the diner, scanning for tire tracks in the dawn dew, knocking on doors that authorities might ignore. As the first hints of purple edged the horizon, a low rumble echoed from the distance. One rider, early, pulling up with a nod. More would come. The iron promise didn't mobilize for glory. They did it because someone had to. For Nina, for Eleanor, for the fragile thread of trust in a world quick to unravel it. Hank revved his engine once, the sound a vow in the still air. The search had begun, and with it, a chain of events that would test loyalties, unearth buried sins, and remind them all what it meant to ride for the light in the gathering storm. If you've made it this far, hit that like button. It helps these stories reach the roads that need them most. The first rays of dawn sliced through the desert haze like golden knives, painting the horizon in strokes of fire. Hank's Harley growled to life beneath him, the vibration humming through his bones as he led the convoy out of the gas station lot. 50 bikes now, a thunderous phalanx of chrome and leather, engines roaring in unison like a beast awakening. Nina had stayed behind with the attendant's wife, her eyes locked on the retreating taillights until they vanished into the dust. Hank had promised her updates, real ones, not platitudes, and the weight of that vow pressed against his chest like an old war medal. They rode in formation, a disciplined swarm cutting across the empty highway. Jax, the club's wiry scout, with a sniper's eye from his military days, flanked Hank on the left, his bike's side mirror rigged with a dash cam that captured every mile. Rico brought up the rear, his massive frame steady as he coordinated via radio, voices crackling with purpose over the wind-whipped air. The Iron Promise wasn't a gang. They were a brotherhood forged in the fires of forgotten battles, men who'd stared down chaos and chosen order instead. Hank had called them at dawn's edge, and they'd answered without question. Mechanics dropping tools, fathers kissing kids goodbye, all converging on this stretch of Route 17 like iron filings to a magnet. The Blue Coyote Diner loomed ahead, a squat relic of neon and faded turquoise, its parking lot still shadowed by the retreating night. They pulled in single file, engines cutting off one by one in a cascading silence that amplified the morning's chill. Gravel crunched under boots as they dismounted, vests emblazoned with the serpent emblem catching the light. Hank scanned the lot first, empty, save for a rusted pickup and the faint oil stains from last night's patrons. No sign of Elena's Chevy, but he noted the alleyway behind, narrow and choked with trash bins, where shadows lingered like unspoken regrets. "Spread out," Hank ordered, his voice carrying the gravel of command honed in dusty barracks overseas. "Jax, check the perimeter. Rico, talk to the staff. We're looking for a woman, mid-30s, sundress, dark hair, left around 10 last night." The men moved like a well-oiled machine, no wasted motion, their presence drawing stares from the early shift cook flipping eggs inside. A few locals at the counter paused mid-bite, forks hovering, but no one challenged the bikers. In towns like this, the Iron Promise was legend. Whispers of rides that saved farms from foreclosure, searches that brought runaways home. They weren't here to intimidate, they were here to unearth truth. Rico emerged from the diner after 10 minutes, wiping coffee from his mustache, his face etched with the club's quiet intensity. Waitress remembers her. Elena Calderon, yeah. Sat in the corner booth, ordered the special, chili and cornbread. Guy was late, slick type in a button-down, bought her a drink. They talked, laughed a bit. She left alone around 9:40. Said something about heading home early. No drama. He paused, glancing at the lot. But the waitress saw that car Nina mentioned, a black sedan, tinted windows, idling across the street. Didn't think much of it then. Hank's jaw tightened, the pieces slotting into place like gears in a locked engine. A blind date gone silent, a circling shadow, too deliberate for coincidence. He knelt by the alley's edge, fingers tracing faint tire marks in the dirt, the rubber scent mingling with stale grease. Not random, he muttered to Jax, who crouched beside him, camera whirring softly. Someone was watching. The scout nodded, his eyes narrowing on a discarded napkin caught in the chain-link fence, its edges frayed, but ink still visible. A phone number, scrawled in hurried blue. Hank pocketed it, the paper crisp against his palm, a breadcrumb in the gathering fog. As the sun climbed, baking the asphalt, the search widened. Riders fanned out along the back roads flanking Route 17, dusty veins of the desert that twisted toward forgotten trailer parks and abandoned lots. Hank took the lead on Elena's likely path home, the old Chevy's route pieced from Nina's map. Wind whipped through his beard, carrying the sharp tang of creosote bushes, while the horizon blurred into shimmering waves of heat. Memories surfaced unbidden, his own sister's vanishing act years back, chalked up to personal choices by indifferent cops, until the club had ridden until they found her, broken but breathing. That promise, to protect the overlooked, had rebuilt him, stitch by scar. Now it pulled him forward, a tether against the void. They stopped at a crossroads gas station 20 miles out, the pumps humming under a sagging awning. A clerk, bleary-eyed from the night shift, confirmed the black sedan, fueled up around 10:15, driver alone, paying cash with a nod and no words. No plates visible in the grainy security feed Rico pulled from his laptop, but the make matched. A late-model Ford, sleek and anonymous. "Headed east," the clerk said, pointing toward the hills where arroyos carved hidden paths. Hank radioed the update, the convoy splintering into pairs, engines firing like distant thunder. Loyalty like this wasn't shouted, it was lived, in the miles logged. The doors knocked without warrant. By midday, fatigue clawed at the edges, but resolve held firm. They regrouped at a roadside pullout, maps spread on a tailgate, water bottles passed hand to hand. Jax traced potential routes with a grease pencil, marking spots for overlooked cameras, farm cams, traffic lights, even a vet's office with exterior views. "If she's out there, we'll grid it till we hit pay dirt," he said, clapping Hank's shoulder. The touch spoke volumes, brothers in arms, chosen not by chance but by creed. Hank nodded, staring at the napkin in his hand. Dialing the number got a dead tone. Disconnected, a ghost line, but it was a lead, thin as desert air. As the sun beat down, turning the world to molten gold, a call crackled over the radio from Rico. A possible sighting, an abandoned Chevy matching the description, tucked in a dry wash 5 miles off the grid. Heart pounding, Hank gunned his engine, the brotherhood surging behind him. Dust clouds billowed in their wake, a testament to motion against stillness. Whatever had pulled Elena into the shadows, it wouldn't face indifference. The Iron Promise rode for redemption, for the quiet honor that bound them, turning personal oaths into unbreakable chains. The search deepened, layer by layer, into the heart of secrets long buried. And now, I invite you to leave in the comments where you're watching from and the exact hour you heard this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel and at what moments they reach you. The dry wash carved a jagged scar through the sun-baked earth, its walls of cracked red clay rising like silent sentinels under the relentless midday glare. Hank throttled down as the convoy crested the ridge, engines purring low to avoid scattering what might be evidence. Dust devils swirled in the distance, dancing ghosts across the barren expanse, carrying the acrid bite of sun-scorched stone and faint metallic tang from the arroyo's hidden depths. Below, the abandoned Chevy sat crooked in the gravel, its faded blue paint dulled by a layer of silt, hood propped open like a mouth frozen in surprise. No one in sight, but the scene screamed wrong, tires sunk deep as if dragged or driven in haste. Hank killed his engine first, the sudden quiet amplifying the wind's low moan through the scrub. He dismounted with a creak of leather, boots sinking into the loose soil as Jax and Rico pulled up beside him. The rest of the riders fanned out in a loose perimeter, eyes sharp on the horizon, vests catching the light in a ripple of iron resolve. This wasn't their first rodeo. The Iron Promise had chased shadows before. Missing vets, kids snatched in the night, but each one etched deeper into the collective memory, a reminder of oaths sworn under starless skies. Hank's pulse steadied as he approached the vehicle, the air thick with the oily residue of a recent engine fire, now cold and accusing. "Easy," he murmured to Jax, who was already circling with his camera, lens clicking like a heartbeat. The driver's door hung ajar, a woman's purse spilled across the seat, lipstick tube, wallet with Elena's faded ID peeking out, a single earring glinting in the sun. No blood, no overt signs of struggle, but the disarray whispered of interruption. Keys still in the ignition, turned to off as if someone had fled mid-panic. Hank's gloved hand brushed the dashboard, feeling the residual warmth that hadn't fully bled away. She'd been here, alive not long ago. The realization hit like a gut punch, stirring the old scar across his ribs from a desert ambush long past. A reminder that time was a thief in these games. Rico knelt by the rear tire, his thick fingers probing the tread marks that veered off the faint track. Fresh. Pulled in here maybe an hour ago. Tops. No plates. Someone stripped 'em. He glanced up, sweat beading on his brow despite the dry heat. And look here. He pointed to a scuff on the fender, paint chipped where metal had kissed metal in a glancing blow. Nearby, in the washer's floor, a second set of tracks diverged sharply, deeper grooves suggesting weight, perhaps two people or a struggle. The black sedan's shadow loomed in Hank's mind, that circling predator from Nina's account, now materialized in the dirt. They worked methodically, the Brotherhood's rhythm unbroken by the isolation. One rider, Tommy, a lanky ex-firefighter with burns hidden under his sleeves, climbed the wash's lip for vantage, radioing back sightings of an old service road snaking east toward the hills. Another, Lena's quiet counterpart in the club, a nurse named Maria who'd patched more than wounds, sifted through the purse's contents. A crumpled receipt from the Blue Coyote, time-stamped 9:42 p.m., and a note scribbled on the back. "Call me after. R." Initials only, but the ink bled slightly, as if written in haste under duress. Hank pocketed it beside the diner napkin, the two scraps forming a fragile bridge across the unknown. As the sun hammered down, turning the air to a shimmering haze, doubt crept in like cooling shadows. Where was she? The Chevy's abandonment felt deliberate, a lure or a dead end. Hank leaned against the fender, closing his eyes against the glare, and let the past flood back unbidden. 20 years ago, In a sand-choked valley halfway around the world, he'd lost his spotter to a sniper's whisper. The man had dragged Hank to cover, gasping, "Promise me. Look after the ones left behind." That vow had birthed the iron promise, pulling wanderers like Jax and Rico into a family forged not in birthrights but in shared silences. Elena, with her factory-worn hands and hopeful sundress, was one of those left behind, overlooked by a system that prioritized headlines over heartbeats. He wouldn't let her fade into the statistics. A crackle from the radio shattered the tension. "Hank, it's Jax up top. Got movement? Dust plume, half a mile out, heading this way. Could be nothing but—" The words trailed, but the urgency didn't. Hank straightened, signaling the crew to mount up without a word. Engines roared to life in staggered waves, a symphony of controlled thunder that echoed off the wash walls. They formed a defensive arc around the Chevy, headlights flicking on even in daylight, beams cutting the dust like accusatory fingers. Whatever approached it wouldn't find easy prey. The club's presence was a statement, etched in chrome and creed. The vehicle crested the rise, a dusty ranch truck, battered and lone, driven by an older man in a sweat-stained hat. He slowed at the sight of the bikers, hands visible on the wheel, face weathered like the land itself. Hank rode forward alone, engine idling, to meet him at the perimeter. "Morning," the man said, voice rough as gravel. "Heard the rumble. You folks with the search?" Word travelled fast in these parts, whispers of the iron promise, mobilizing for a missing woman already threading through hamlets and trailers. Hank nodded, keeping his tone even. "Elena Calderon? You see anything out here?" The rancher rubbed his chin, eyes flicking to the Chevy. "Heard a car sputter by last night. Round 11, I reckon. Then that sedan, black as sin, tailing close, pulled over yonder." He gestured east, toward a cluster of junipers shading a forgotten trail. "Woman got out arguing. Voices carried on the wind, then quiet. Didn't see more. My eyes ain't what they used to be." No names, no details that pinned it down, but the account matched, adding flesh to the ghost of the night. Gratitude passed between them in a nod, the rancher offering a thermos of water before rumbling away. Hank radioed the new lead, the convoy shifting east like a tide pulled by unseen currents. The junipers loomed ahead, their needles whispering secrets in the breeze, shadows pooling deep where answers might hide or horrors wait. Tension coiled tighter, the search evolving from hunt to reckoning. Elena's trail warmed, but so did the underbelly of whatever force had claimed her, a web of small-town favors, perhaps, or deeper corruptions that preyed on the solitary. By late afternoon, as the heat began to wane into golden slants, they reached the trailhead. Dismounted again, flashlights probing the underbrush despite the lingering light. Footprints, small, healed, scattered the soft earth, leading toward a rusted gate half buried in vines. Hank's hand rested on the latch, the metal warm under his palm, heart steady with the weight of promise. This was no mere ride. It was the thread pulling them toward justice, loyalty's quiet fire against the encroaching dark. Whatever lay beyond, the iron promise would face it unbroken, for the woman they'd never met but already claimed as kin. The gate creaked open, inviting them into the unknown, where redemption waited in the balance. The rusted gate groaned like a reluctant confession as Hank pushed it aside, the hinges protesting in a screech that echoed through the tangled underbrush. Afternoon light filtered through the junipers in dappled shafts, casting elongated shadows that danced across the overgrown path like fingers reaching for secrets. The air hung heavy with the earthy musk of damp soil and pine resin, a stark contrast to the desert's dry bite they'd left behind. Hank stepped through first, his boots crunching on fallen needles, the weight of his vest a familiar anchor against the uncertainty ahead. Behind him, the brotherhood followed in tight formation, Jax with his camera slung low, Rico scanning the flanks, the others a silent wall of leather and resolve. This trail, faint and forgotten, snaked into a shallow ravine where the world seemed to fold in on itself, muffling the distant hum of engines left idling at the trailhead. They moved with the precision of men who'd navigated worse than weeds, close order, eyes on the ground for tracks, ears tuned to the rustle of leaves that might betray more than wildlife. Hank's mind replayed the rancher's words. The argument carried on the wind, a woman's voice sharp with plea or protest. Elena's footprints, those tentative heels, dotted the path sporadically, merging with boot prints that suggested pursuit. No overt traces of force, but the disarray spoke volumes. A snapped branch here, a scuff of dirt there, hints of haste in the gathering dusk of her night. The iron promise wasn't storming in blind. They were piecing a puzzle, each fragment a thread to the truth, bound by the oath that had drawn them from their lives to this shadowed vein of the land. Half a mile in, the path widened into a clearing ringed by crumbling stone walls, remnants of an old homestead, vines clawing at the mortar like insistent memories. Hank signaled a halt, the group fanning out to probe the edges. Rico spotted it first, a glint of metal half buried under a pile of leaves. The edge of a hubcap matching the Chevy's make. He unearthed it carefully, brushing away debris to reveal fresh scratches, as if wrenched free in struggle. "She was dragged this way," he said low, voice steady, but laced with the club's unspoken fury. Not violence in the raw sense, but the vestiges of coercion, the kind that left echoes in the earth. Hank nodded, pocketing a shard of taillight glass nearby, its red hue stark against the green. The pieces aligned. The sedan had cornered her here, away from prying eyes, in a place where help dissolved into silence. As they pressed on, the ravine deepened, walls closing like a vice, the air cooling to a chill that seeped through jackets. Jax's camera captured it all, the play of light on dew-kissed ferns, the faint trail of disturbed soil leading to a weathered shed at the clearing's far end. The structure leaned against a boulder, door ajar, its splintered frame suggesting recent use. Hank approached alone, hand hovering near his belt, not for weapons, but for the radio that bound them. He nudged the door with his boot, hinges wailing in protest, revealing an interior dimmed by dust motes swirling in the intrusion of light. Empty save for cobwebs and the faint scent of fear sweat mingled with motor oil. But on the dirt floor, a scrap of fabric caught his eye. Sundress, blue, torn at the hem, fibers snagged on a rusty nail. The find hit like a slow burn, igniting the fire of purpose in Hank's chest. Elena had been here, her hope unraveling thread by thread. He radioed the crew, voice a controlled rumble. "Clue inside, secure the perimeter." They swarmed in measured waves, Maria kneeling to bag the fabric with gloved hands, her nurse's precision turning evidence into hope. Whispers circulated, speculation on the R from the note, ties to local whispers of a shady fixer who arranged dates for favors. Preying on the isolated. The club had heard such tales before, corruption woven into the fabric of small towns, where authority turned blind eyes to the vulnerable, prioritizing silence over justice. Hank's own past flickered, a botched op overseas, a civilian left behind to the system's indifference, the guilt that had forged his promise to never let it happen again on his watch. Tension thickened as dusk crept in, painting the ravine in bruised purples. A low rumble echoed from the trailhead, not their bikes, but an approaching vehicle, headlights piercing the gloom like accusatory stares. The group tensed, forming a loose cordon as a county cruiser nosed into view, its grills scarred from off-road patrols. The deputy who stepped out was young, starched uniform crisp against the wilds, badge glinting with official weight. "This area's restricted," he called, hand resting casual on his holster, eyes narrowing at the Iron Promise emblems. "Private property. What's your business here?" Hank met him halfway, stance open but unyielding, the sunset gilding his silhouette. Searching for Elena Calderon. Missing since last night. Found her car, now this. He held up the bagged fabric, letting the evidence speak. The deputy's face flickered. Recognition, perhaps reluctance, before settling into protocol. Heard about it. Department's on it. You bikers need to back off. This could compromise the scene. But his tone wavered, eyes darting to the shed, as if the weight of unseen strings pulled at him. Rico stepped forward. Voice even. We've got leads your boys missed. Rancher saw the tail, sedan and all. You telling us to stand down while she fades? The air crackled with the ethical standoff, the deputy a pawn in a larger game, small-town ties that bound mouths shut, favors traded in backrooms. Hank saw it in the man's hesitation, the moral chasm between duty and debt. We're not here to step on toes, Hank said. His words a bridge over the divide, but promises were made, to the girl waiting, to the code that doesn't forget. The deputy paused, radio crackling with dispatch chatter, then sighed, stepping aside. Fine, but log it official. I'll call it in. Unofficial assist. It was a concession, born of the Iron Promise's quiet legend, the knowledge that their rides had exposed truths, badges buried. As the cruiser retreated, tail lights fading into twilight, the group exhaled. The encounter was a reminder. Justice wasn't seized by force, but earned through integrity, the unbreaking line between right and the rot that festered unchecked. Hank traced the path beyond the shed, where it climbed toward a ridge overlooking distant lights. A trailer park, perhaps, or the edge of town. Night fell fully now, stars pricking the velvet sky, the ravine's chill urging them onward. They mounted up at the trailhead, engines a low chorus against the dark, heading for the ridge with renewed fire. Elena's trail pulsed warmer, pulling them toward confrontation, not with fists, but with the light of loyalty that pierced even the deepest shadows. The promise held, a beacon in the moral storm, binding them as the chosen family that refused to yield. If you've made it this far, hit that like button. It helps these stories reach the roads that need them most. The ridge rose like a jagged spine under the star-pricked canopy, its slope etched with the faint scars of erosion and forgotten footpaths. Hank led the ascent on foot now, the club's bikes parked in a shadowed cluster below, engines silenced to ghosts in the cooling night. Moonlight silvered the rocks, casting long, wavering shadows that played tricks on the eyes, while the air carried the crisp bite of juniper sap and the distant muffled hum of a generator from the valley floor. His boots scraped softly against the loose gravel, each step measured. The weight of the bagged fabric from the shed a talisman in his pocket. Behind him, Jax and Rico flanked like silent guardians, their breath steady in the thin mountain air, the Brotherhood's presence a bulwark against the encroaching unknown. They crested the ridge in single file, the world unfolding below in a patchwork of dim lights, trailers huddled like wary animals in a sprawling park at the town's frayed edge. Sodium lamps buzzed faintly, illuminating chain-link fences and rusted swing sets, the kind of place where dreams settled into routines and secrets festered in the quiet hours. Hank crouched at the overlook, eyes scanning the layout. A central dirt road, snaking through rows of mobile homes, dogs barking sporadically, a few windows glowing with the blue flicker of televisions. No overt movement, but intuition prickled at his nape. The same instinct that had saved him in sand-swept ambushes, where stillness hid the storm. There, Rico whispered, pointing to a trailer at the periphery, its porch light out. A black sedan parked crookedly in the drive, plates obscured by mud. The sighting ignited a low murmur through the group, radios clicking with hushed confirmations as riders below prepped to circle the perimeter without drawing eyes. Hank's mind raced through the threads, the circling car from Nina's window, the tail at the diner, the rancher's glimpse of argument. This wasn't chance. It was a pattern, woven by hands, that thrived on the overlooked. Elena, with her simple life and solitary stand, had crossed paths with something rotten, perhaps the R from the note. A local operator trading in vulnerabilities, pulling strings in the underbelly of authority. The iron promise had unraveled such knots before, exposing favors that shielded the guilty while the innocent dissolved into reports. Hank's own redemption flickered in memory. The brother lost overseas, his dying words a forge for the club's creed, turning personal scars into collective shield. They descended in pairs, melting into the shadows along the park's fence line, the night's chill seeping through leather like a warning. Jax hacked a loose panel with wire cutters, the snip muffled by gloves, and they slipped through into the warren of backlots. The ground was uneven, pocked with potholes that swallowed footsteps, the air thick with the mingled scents of charcoal grills gone cold and overgrown weeds heavy with dew. Hank signaled a split, Rico and Tommy toward the central road for distraction if needed, the rest hugging the edges toward the target trailer. Tension coiled like a spring, not in aggression, but in the ethical tightrope, probing without invasion, truth over trespass, loyalty demanding they tread where badges feared to follow. Approaching the sedan, Hank knelt in the gloom, flashlight beam and narrow lance under the chassis. Fresh oil drip, still tacky. The vehicle had idled here recently, engine warm to the touch. Jax's camera whirred softly, capturing the interior through a cracked window. Fast food wrappers, a map folded to local routes, and on the passenger seat, a woman's scarf, pale, floral, the kind that might pair with a sundress. Heart thudding, Hank traced the trailer's side, peering through a gap in the curtains. Inside, dim lamplight revealed a man pacing, phone to ear, his silhouette broad and agitated. No sign of Eleanor, but the room's disarray, overturned chair, papers scattered, hinted at recent turmoil, vestiges of unrest that spoke louder than shouts. A soft creak from the porch froze them, the door edged open, spilling yellow light like spilled honey. The man emerged, mid-40s, rumpled shirt untucked, face shadowed by a ball cap, lighting a cigarette with hands that trembled slightly. He scanned the night, oblivious to the eyes upon him, then climbed into the sedan, engine coughing to life. Hank radioed the all clear, the convoy stirring below as shadows detached to tail at a distance. But before the car could pull away, a figure stirred in the trailer's window. A woman, bound at the wrists to a chair, her dark hair matted, face turned toward the glass in silent plea. Elena. The glimpse was fleeting, a heartbeat of confirmation that slammed into Hank like shrapnel. "She's inside," he hissed into the radio, voice a blade of urgency. The plan shifted, no chase but containment. Riders converged subtly, blocking exits with parked bikes disguised as passers-by. While Hank and Jack circled back to the trailer, the ethical dilemma gnawed, burst in and risk escalation or call the threads that might entangle them further. Corruption's scent was thick here. The man's ties likely reached into the department, explaining the deputy's earlier waiver. Hank thought of Nina's wide eyes at the station, the promise he'd etched in the dawn light. Family Chosen demanded action, not paralysis, but measured, honoring the moral high ground that defined them. They waited for the sedan to rumble away, Jax slipping a tracker under the bumper in a blur of motion. Then, with Rico's bulk at the door, Hank knocked, firm, unthreatening, a summons rather than a storm. The woman inside, Elena, unbound now by her own efforts or oversight, stumbled to answer, eyes wild with exhaustion but alive with spark. "Help!" she breathed as the door cracked, the word a fracture in the night's facade. No guards, just her, left in the haste of flight. She spilled the tale in whispers, the data setup, the man, a debt collector for a factory boss who'd preyed on her shifts, the struggle that ended in the shed, the abandonment when voices approached, not violence etched in scars, but coercion's grip, loosened by her will and now by theirs. As sirens wailed distant, the deputy's concession bearing fruit, Hank guided her out, Maria wrapping a jacket around her shoulders, the club's quiet strength a balm. The sedan vanished into the dark, but the tracker pulsed on Jax's phone, leading toward answers. Elena's hand clutched Hank's arm, gratitude unspoken but profound, a bridge from stranger to kin. The iron promise stood sentinel as lights flashed closer, their role shifting from hunters to witnesses, ensuring the truth surfaced untainted. In that moment, under the indifferent stars, the promise endured. Redemption not in vengeance, but in the unyielding light of loyalty, pulling one more soul from the shadows into the fold of chosen family. The night deepened, but the path to justice burned brighter, drawing them onward through the moral weave. Sirens sliced through the night like crimson veins, pulsing closer until the trailer's yard flooded with rotating lights that turned the gravel into a staccato dance of blue and red. Elena leaned against Hank, her breath ragged but steadying. The floral scarf from the sedan now draped over her shoulders like a makeshift shield. The air hummed with the electric tang of exhaust from the arriving cruisers, mingling with the night's damp earthiness as deputies spilled out, 3 of them, flashlights sweeping the perimeter in arcs that caught the iron promise riders standing sentinel, unmoving as ancient oaks. Hank's hand rested light on Elena's back, a gesture of quiet assurance, while Maria murmured soft words in Spanish, her nurse's calm weaving through the chaos like a thread of normalcy. The lead deputy, the same young one from the ravine, his uniform now rumpled by the hours, approached with measured steps, radio clipped to his belt, crackling faintly with confirmations from dispatch. His eyes widened at the sight of Elena, then flicked to Hank, a mix of relief and wariness etching his features. "Ma'am," he said, voice pitching professional, "you Elena Calderon? We got a call about a disturbance." She nodded, words tumbling out in a hushed rush. The setup at the diner, the debt twisted into threats by her factory foreman, a man named Ray Harlan, the R from the note, who'd lured her under false pretenses, demanding repayment for favors that had never been asked. The struggle in the shed, the forced ride to the trailer, abandonment when he sensed pursuit closing in. No marks visible, just the exhaustion of coercion's long shadow, the kind that left invisible bruises on the spirit. Hank watched the deputy's face, reading the flicker of recognition. The name Harlan carried weight here. Whispers of a local power broker who'd greased palms from the mill to the precinct, turning oversight into complicity. The iron promise had crossed such lines before, their rides exposing the rot without shattering the fragile peace. "We found her," Hank stated simply, holding out the bagged evidence, the fabric scrap, the note, the hubcap shard. "Tracker on his sedan, heading east on 17, last ping 2 miles out." The deputy hesitated, glancing at his partners, then nodded, the moral pull overriding the strings that tugged at him. "We'll take it from here. But thanks, unofficial." It was a bridge, tentative but real, born of the club's reputation for truth over turf wars. As Elena was guided toward an ambulance that purred into the lot, its lights soft against the harsh cruisers, Nina's face appeared in the rear window of a borrowed truck, pulled up by the club's relay. The girl's eyes locked on her mother, tears carving clean paths through the dust on her cheeks, a reunion forged in the night's forge. Hank stepped back, giving space, but the weight of the promise lingered, a warmth against the chill settling in. He'd carried similar reunions in his saddlebags over the years. The vet pulled from despair, the kid shielded from streets that swallowed dreams. This one hit deeper, echoing his own fractured family, the sister reclaimed from silence, the oath that had mended his scars into purpose. The convoy reformed swiftly, engines rumbling low as the authorities secured the scene. Jax's phone screen glowed with the tracker's pulse, a red dot weaving through back roads toward the mill's outskirts, a hulking complex of silos and chain link. dormant under moonlight, but alive with the ghosts of shifts that ground down lives like Elena's. Hank mounted his Harley, the familiar vibration grounding him, and led a tailing phalanx, 10 riders now, shadows on the highway, headlights dimmed to slits. Wind whipped through his beard, carrying the faint brine of distant rain clouds gathering on the horizon, the road unspooling like a vein toward the heart of corruption. Rico's voice crackled over the radio. "Harlan's got pull. Mill owner's nephew, they say. Debts like hers get collected quiet. Badges look away." It was the system's underbelly, where justice bent for the connected, leaving the solitary to statistics. They crested a rise overlooking the mill, the tracker's dot halting at a gated compound, floodlights bathing the perimeter in sterile white. The black sedan idled by a side entrance, Harlan's silhouette visible through the windshield, pacing now with a phone pressed to his ear. No guards in sight, just the hum of machinery winding down from the day shift, steam vents hissing like exhaling secrets. Hank signaled a hold, the group dismounting in the scrub beyond the fence, boots silent on the cooling sand. Memories surfaced, the Desert War's final patrol, a promise whispered amid the whine of incoming fire to stand for those the world deemed expendable. Harlan represented the antithesis, exploiter of vulnerabilities, twisting trust into chains. His dates, a veil for extortion that preyed on single mothers like Elena, workers cornered by circumstance. Jax rigged a drone from his pack, a quiet eye in the sky, its whir lost to the wind, capturing footage of Harlan unloading a duffel from the trunk, movements hurried, glancing over his shoulder. The bag's bulk suggested ledgers or payoffs, the mill's dark ledger of coerced silence. Rico hacked the gate's basic lock with a portable jammer, the click muffled, and they slipped in pairs toward the shadows of the silos. Tension thrummed like a taut wire, not for confrontation but revelation, the ethical imperative to document, to force the light on deeds done in darkness. Hank's pulse matched the drone's feed on his phone. Harlan, entering a low office, door slamming. The interior lit by a desk lamp that spilled yellow across papers, and a safe cracked open. A sudden shout from within shattered the quiet. Harlan's voice, edged with panic, arguing into the phone about bikers sniffing around, need to bury it now. The words confirmed the web. Ties to the foreman, the date as bait, Elena as leverage for unpaid dues fabricated from thin air. Hank radioed the deputy's line, feeding the live stream, ensuring official eyes witnessed without the club's hands tipping the scale. Brotherhood meant strategy, not spectacle. Loyalty's true power lay in unmasking, letting integrity unravel the lies. As Harlan bolted from the office, duffel in tow, toward a waiting truck, the drone tracked his path, the red dot merging with the mill's exit. The chase reignited, engines flaring in controlled pursuit as Harlan's truck barreled onto the access road, dust plume trailing like a confession. Hank leaned into the curve, the night's adrenaline sharpening his focus, the stars above a vast witness to the unfolding, sirens joined distant, the deputy's concession blooming into action, lights flashing behind, closing the net. Harlan swerved erratically, but the tracker's unerring path and the club's flanking formation herded him toward a dead-end pullout where Arroyos boxed him in. He skidded to a halt, door flying open, hands raised in surrender as cruisers hemmed him, the duffel spilling contents. Receipts, notes mirroring Elena's ordeal, threads to a dozen more silent stories. Hank pulled up at the edge, engine idling, watching as Harlan was cuffed under the flood of lights, face pale, empire crumbling in the beam of truth. No blows exchanged, just the quiet victory of persistence, the moral tide turning against the current of corruption. Elena's voice echoed in his mind, her whispered thanks at the trailer, a testament to resilience reclaimed. The iron promise dispersed as dawn's first blush touched the east, riders peeling off with nods and grips of solidarity, their role complete, but the echo enduring. Yet as Hank rode back toward the station where Nina waited, a final radio crackle from Jax hinted at deeper roots, the mill owner's shadow looming larger, a promise unfinished. The night had yielded one soul, but Justice's road stretched on, demanding more from the unyielding creed. The pullout dead-ended against a sheer wall of arroyo stone, the truck's tires spinning futilely in the gravel as Harlan's engine whined in desperation. Dawn's tentative light bled over the horizon, gilding the dust clouds that hung like veils in the still air, the scent of scorched rubber sharp against the morning's cool dew. Hank held his position at the periphery, Harley's rumble a steady undercurrent to the chaos, his gloved hands loose on the grips as cruisers boxed in the fugitive from both flanks. The Iron Promise riders formed a loose semicircle, headlights dimmed, but presence unyielding, shadows etched long across the scrub. No one advanced. This was the handoff, the culmination of shadows chased through the night, where loyalty's quiet force yielded the stage to the law's reluctant machinery. Harlan stumbled from the cab, duffel clutched like a lifeline, his face gaunt under the strobing lights, eyes darting like a cornered animal's. Deputies swarmed forward, voices sharp with command. "Hands up! Drop it!" As the bag hit the ground, spilling its guts, dog-eared ledgers, Polaroids of wide-eyed workers signing phantom debts, notes scrawled with names like Elena's, each a thread in a tapestry of exploitation. The foreman, Ray Harlan, mid-level enforcer for the mill's iron-fisted owner, had built his leverage on the desperate, fabricated loans against overtime, dates as veiled threats to silence complaints, all funneled through backroom deals that kept badges at bay. Elena's blind hope had been the bait, her factory shifts the hook, but the night's unraveling exposed the rot, one coerced signature at a time. The lead deputy, his name tag reading Ellis, cuffed Harlan with a click that echoed like finality, the man's protests dissolving into mutters about connections and mistakes. Ellis shot Hank a nod across the divide, the earlier wariness softened by the evidence now bagged and catalogued under floodlights. "This ties back to the owner, Victor Kane," he said low, as if the words tasted bitter. "Harlan's just the arm. Kane's the head. We'll need statements, yours too, if you're willing." Hank inclined his head, the weight of the promise settling deeper. The Iron Promise didn't seek credit. They sought closure, the moral ledger balanced not by glory, but by the light piercing the veil. Jax's drone footage, already relayed to the cruiser's laptops, sealed it. Irrefutable frames of the office raid, the duffel's contents, Harlan's panicked call that confirmed the web. As Harlan was loaded into a cruiser, the convoy's engines stirred, a low chorus fading into the awakening desert. Hank led the ride back toward town, the road unspooling under tires that hummed with exhaustion and triumph. Wind carried the faint promise of rain from gathering clouds, washing clean the night's grime, while birdsong pierced the air like tentative notes of renewal. Memories cascaded for Hank, the war-torn promise that birthed the club. Brothers like Jax and Rico who traded chaos for creed, the sister he'd pulled from her own abyss years back. Elena's case mirrored them all, the overlooked fighting silent battles, redeemed not by saviors, but by the chosen family's unbreaking stand. This ride had tested that bond, unearthing not just one woman, but a fracture in the town's underbelly, where justice morale outlasted institutional decay. They reconvened at the hospital in Santa Esperanza, a low-slung building of white stucco glowing under sodium lamps, its parking lot dotted with the club's Harleys, like steadfast sentinels. Elena sat on a bench outside the ER doors, bandaged wrists hidden under sleeves, a cup of coffee steaming in her hands. Nina huddled beside her, head on her mother's shoulder, the reunion's raw edges softened by the morning's light. The girl spotted Hank first, rising with a rush of words. "You found her, you really did," her voice cracking like dawn's first light. Eleanor met his gaze, eyes rimmed red but steady, the sundress replaced by scrubs, but her spirit unbroken. "I thought no one would come," she whispered. The words a bridge across the chasm of her ordeal. Hank knelt to their level, his rough hand enveloping Nina's smaller one, the gesture speaking volumes of the code that bound them. "We ride for the promises that matter," he said simply, the iron promise emblem on his vest catching the sun, like a vow etched in metal. The club gathered loosely around, nods and quiet grips exchanged. Maria checking Elena's vitals one last time, Rico sharing a thermos of strong brew, Jax reviewing footage with Ellis to ensure the case stuck. Word had spread through the mill by now, shifts buzzing with whispers of Kane's impending fall, workers stepping forward with their own silent stories, the ethical dam breaking under the flood of truth. Harlan's arrest was the spark, the ledgers, the fire, burning away the corruption that preyed on the solitary. Hank felt the old scars ache less in that moment, redemption's quiet balm seeping through, a legacy passed not in fanfare, but in the lives steadied. As the sun climbed, baking the lot in golden warmth, the brotherhood prepared to disperse, jobs waiting, families calling. But the ride's echo lingering like exhaust in the air. Hank lingered last, watching mother and daughter walk arm in arm toward a waiting cab, the horizon stretching open before them. Nina turned once, waving with a smile that pierced the morning haze, a silent thanks that wove into the club's tapestry. He mounted his bike then, engine growling to life. The vibration a familiar pulse against his chest. The road called onward, new shadows always lurking, but the promise held. Lealdade inconditional, justicia against the tide, the family chosen that turned personal oaths into unbreakable chains. Rico pulled alongside for the final stretch, helmet off, wind tousling his hair. "Kane's next," he said, voice carrying over the roar. "Deputies say the evidence chains him too. This ride, it changes things." Hank nodded, eyes on the endless blacktop, the desert blooming with creosote under the rising sun. Change wasn't thunderous. It was the steady turn of wheels, the moral compass that guided them through cynicism's fog. The iron promise would ride again, for the next Nina, the next Elena, honor as legacy, sacrifice as the quiet heroism that bound them. As they crested the final rise, the town shrinking in the mirrors, Hank felt the weight lift, replaced by the fire of purpose renewed. The story closed not with fanfare, but with the hum of engines fading into the vast, promising dawn. Thank you for joining this ride with the Iron Promise. If these tales of redemption, loyalty, and moral justice move you, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We've got more chapters waiting on the horizon, ready to roll.